Hey everyone and welcome back on the channel. My name is Alex, and as you know, this video is a comparison between the PUMA Fast-R 3 and the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. These two shoes are very competitive because they're the top of the line pinnacle shoes, both from PUMA and ASICS. Of course, there's also the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo and the Metaspeed Ray, but for today we're comparing the Metaspeed Sky against the Fast-R 3. One of the reasons for that is that both shoes are kind of forcing you or inviting you to strike towards your forefoot. This video, like I said in the intro, is sponsored by STRYD, and thanks to the STRYD pods, these pods that you see right here, which allow you to measure your running power, train by power, but also gather tons of different metrics, we will be able to compare the two shoes in depth with, like I said, lots of data. And without no further ado, let's dive into it. I'm not going to go too much into the specs, into the numbers of the two shoes when it comes to the stack, the drop, and so on. There's some other videos on this channel or elsewhere on the internet where you can get these numbers. Here, everything is about the metrics, but also the subjective feelings of putting these shoes on, running in them, and sharing that with you. When it comes to the fit of the two shoes, they're both on the longer side of things. You could almost consider going half a size down. The uppers are very, very pliable, as you can see. The heel counters are also quite pliable, especially here on the PUMA, a bit less so on the ASICS. Both shoes, I would say, are on the narrow side of things. And in general, I would say that the fit is not superb, not bad, but it's somewhere in between. If I had to choose one of the two uppers, I would go for the ASICS, simply because it holds my foot a bit better and it feels a bit less plasticky and wrinkling because of the extra material that you can find on this shoe. The ASICS is maybe a little less long and a bit wider, but like I said, both shoes are more on the long and narrow side of things than wide and short. Let's look very quickly also at the midsole and the ride of the two shoes. If I had to describe, and that's, after looking a bit at the data, because I already selected the portions of the runs that I'm going to share with you and that we'll compare thanks to the STRYD pods, I would say that the PUMA feels less stable. It feels like you are bouncing a bit higher and a bit faster, meaning that the decompression of this foam is more energetic. However, if you want to enjoy that, you really need to be striking almost like as if you had to put your foot on rails, on, train tracks. And if you're kind of striking a bit on the side, well, it's less than ideal and you're not benefiting from the full experience. So if you're really striking, in the axis here, and you can do that continuously over the course of whatever distance you're racing, then this might be a fun experience for you. Otherwise, it feels very narrow and unstable, but also bouncier, more aggressive, and more super shoe-ish than the ASICS. The ASICS on the other side feels a bit more traditional for a super shoe. It's definitely a, top of the line super shoe, but because the PUMA feels so, aggressive and dramatic when it comes to the level of bounce, the level of energy return, the ASICS feels a bit less so, and then therefore a bit more traditional, but it's also a bit more stable. It's a bit more reassuring, and I feel like for longer distances, this is a shoe that would have my preference because of the extra confidence that I would get from it. Whereas the PUMA, and you'll see the numbers, would probably win my preference, win my votes for shorter stuff. I would say that both shoes are on the softer side of things, with the PUMA being a bit softer. But again, if you want to experience that softness without having the risks associated to it, you definitely need to be striking in the center of the shoe, in the axis. Otherwise, as soon as you kind of land a bit wonky on the side and you're not super stable, this shoe is not forgiving anything. It will make you pay the high price for that lack of alignment in your foot strike. The ASICS is more forgiving, and I kind of appreciate that myself. A shoe for the masses and a shoe for the elites. If you want to kind of, make it very simplistic, that's how you could separate the two. But I think it's a bit more complex than that. Let's look quickly at the STRYD data for these two shoes. So what I did is I went on the track to have very similar testing conditions for the two shoes. And I did 2 by 2000. And this is what you will see here. The two shoes have very different results, and that I could already see with my watch on the wrist when running. On the track, I decided to go for the same power output, around my threshold power output, so around that 330 watts. I ended up with the two shoes at 333 watts. I thought it was 332 on the track, but it's actually 333 watts here on my STRYD power center, and we will very quickly look at everything together. The first thing, and that's a very nice feature that STRYD is offering, is the footpath visualization, which can show you a bit how you are moving in 3 dimensions with the 2 STRYD pods and how your gait cycle and foot strike is working. What you see in the solid line is the ASICS, and what you see in the dash dotted line is the PUMA shoe. And what you can see here is that I have a higher back kick with the PUMA shoe, meaning I go further back up. And then I also kind of go a bit more both lateral and medial. So I kind of tend to be a bit more centered with the ASICS shoe and a bit more wild in my gait cycle with the PUMA. That's the front view. Now, if we look at the side view, I mean, that definitely confirms that the PUMA has a higher and kind of also more extended back kick. I also kind of take my foot a bit further to the front of my gait cycle. Is that because of the extended plate here? I don't know. And then if I look at it from the back, this is actually quite interesting because what you can see is that I'm kind of leaning to the left, which is obviously the direction I'm running on the track counterclockwise. And that's maybe why, because I'm taking the turns to the left, and therefore my alignment seems also to be leaning a bit to the left. The footpath here is again the footpath over 2000 meters, 2 by 2000. And therefore it's kind of aggregating all the data points from all the seconds, all the footsteps of that distance. So more than 7 minutes for each shoe. And therefore the leaning towards the left is not dramatic, but I think that's primarily the explanation for it being on the track. It's quite impressive to see how far up I'm going with the PUMA compared to the ASICS shoe. All right, let's look at the numbers right now. So what you have here is, let's start with the power. Like I said, power 330 watts with the ASICS, 333 watts with the PUMA. So 333 watts with the 2 shoes, exactly same power output, meaning that we're really comparing apples to apples on the same course and the same day. To make it very scientific, I should have done 2000, 2000, 2000, 2000, but I didn't do that. I'm not in shape to do 4 by 2000. I could have also done 4 by 1000, a BBA that would have been a bit more scientific. But nevertheless, what you have here, I believe, is a fairly good comparison. Do not look at heart rate simply because my heart rate band was running out of battery. And therefore, what you see here is the numbers from my watch directly, my Garmin, and the optical sensor on my Garmin never really worked. Maybe STRYD, if you want to launch heart rate bands, heart rate strap to compete with the very poor Garmin data when it comes to heart rate natively on the watch. That's maybe an idea. So do not consider heart rate at all here. It's not relevant and it's not the correct numbers for sure. I know what I would have for that pace. All right, so for the 2 shoes, I ran 2:04. I did 5 laps. It should be 2:00 flat. I did overtake a few people. That's maybe what is adding a few meters, and then the calibration of the STRYD pod might not be perfect, which is something I should have done before taking the shoes for that test. Calibration doesn't affect the rest of the numbers. It's just a calibration when it comes to distance. And technically it's auto-calibrate with the watch, but STRYD recommends to do it manually and to kind of adjust if you see some discrepancies in distance. This here, you know, is not huge, but it's not nothing at the same time. So it's maybe worth calibrating the STRYD pod, and I will definitely do that shortly. At least what's good is that it's consistent. I ran 2:04 with the 2 shoes, meaning that 5 laps with the STRYD pods is 2:04 kilometers, which again, you know, I think is a good thing. Now, when it comes to moving time, I ran 7:21 with the ASICS and 7:09 with the PUMA. I saved 12 seconds with the PUMA shoe, meaning that my pace was 3:37 with the ASICS and 3:30 per kilometer in the PUMA shoe. The PUMA shoe for the same power output was more efficient. That's, you know, everything about PUMA's marketing is about the savings in running economy, which, you know, should translate in also some gains when it comes to how your body is moving faster at a similar power output or consuming less power for the same pace, the same amount of, the same pace. So that's a good thing. The PUMA shoe is indeed a bit faster, but is that it? Is there anything else that we can deduct from the metrics? Cadence. Cadence is only a proxy metric which will not have a huge impact on the analysis, especially here because with the two shoes at different paces, but at the same power output, again, I had a cadence of 170 steps per minute. Let's look at ground contact time, which can be a proxy metric for responsiveness. The less time you spend on the ground, the more responsive a shoe is, and also the more time you spend with your feet in the air, which is a good thing because you don't have, the resistance of the ground. And in general, the lower the better for ground contact time. We have 194 with the ASICS, 195 with the PUMA. It's a bit lower. I mean, it's 1 millisecond lower with the ASICS. To be honest, that 1 millisecond is within the margin of error, and I wouldn't call it a huge difference here. But hey, it's 1 millisecond, so the ASICS might be a touch more responsive. It's indeed a bit less bouncy, a bit firmer, quote unquote. It's quite soft, but it's a slightly firmer shoe compared to the PUMA. And maybe that extra, kind of compression and feeling of sinking into that foam here on the PUMA is translated into that 1 millisecond difference in terms of ground contact time. Leg spring stiffness. Leg spring stiffness, remember, is a metric that essentially shows or explains how much energy is stored within your legs before being released at toe off. If you want to take a comparison, take a rubber band, and when you pull on it, you're kind of storing energy, and when you're releasing, that energy is translated into movement, speed, whatever you want to call it. And this is pretty much the same here. So you're storing energy and releasing it at toe off. The higher the leg spring stiffness, the better, because that means that the shoe, in this case, because we're not comparing different legs, they're the same, at least I believe so, between the two tests, the shoe would help you store more energy and release more energy. And leg spring stiffness is a bit higher on the ASICS at 9.8 kilonewton per meter, whereas it's 9.6 kilonewton per meter on the PUMA. What does it mean? It means that the ASICS technically will allow you to have a bit more of that energy that you are storing when, being on the ground and going through your stance, through your gait cycle. It will kind of help you release it a bit better. And that's again in theory. Now, there is one interesting thing with STRYD, and that energy that you are storing, releasing, and the power in general is metabolic power, but there is one component of it, which is form power, and that's how much power is going kind of towards a vertical oscillation and a vertical movement, which is not lost because you cannot go without it. But nevertheless, the lower that number, the better, because technically it means you are a bit more efficient and you're, saving energy to move forwards and to move horizontally. Here, the two shoes are at 76 watts of form power, meaning that the form power, the energy that goes kind of towards that vertical movement, is the same. We can look, however, at vertical oscillation, and vertical oscillation would be the displacement between your kind of base level and your highest level at each step. So the amount of vertical oscillation that you have when you are bouncing against the ground. The lower the better, because if you're jumping super high, you're losing energy, obviously. And it's slightly lower with the ASICS again, 872, 875. Not a big difference, but the PUMA is taking me personally as a runner, because again, these data is for me as Alex, and it might translate to you in the same fashion, but it might also be different to you. So that's again a reminder that this has to be taken with a grain of salt, because we're all different runners, and that data will apply only to me. But for me, myself personally, 875 is slightly more here in terms of vertical oscillation, meaning that I'm bouncing a bit more. That correlates with the feeling I have with the shoe, meaning that it's a bit bouncier, it's a bit more energetic. That decompression is also taking me a bit higher up in the air compared to the ASICS shoe. And last but not least, also quite interesting, the impact loading rate. What is it? The impact loading rate essentially is how much load, how much stress you're putting on your lower legs every second, and therefore how much kind of fatigue you are creating over time with a specific shoe. And here again, the PUMA is higher at 86 and the ASICS is at 80, meaning that you have a bit less of that fatigue, of that loading applied to your legs with the ASICS shoe. And that again would correlate with my feeling. The PUMA shoe feels like it's sitting slightly lower against the ground. And although it's fantastic when it comes to that energy release, the ASICS shoe feels more protective. It feels more stable. This is what I said earlier on in this video. And it also feels like you have something a bit, more comfortable to run in, and that will save your legs for the later stages of your race, of your run, whatever the case may be for you. Long story short, lots of metrics were going in the direction of the ASICS shoe. It's saving legs a bit more, it's allowing me to bounce a bit less up in the air, it has a lower ground contact time, meaning it's maybe a bit more responsive, but it's also slower when it comes to the pace that I had as an output as a result with the same power input applied with the two shoes. The PUMA felt faster. Like I said, I would kind of lean towards this shoe for shorter stuff, and I would probably go towards the Metaspeed for longer efforts. This is, how I would analyze this data. If you see anything else, please let me know. I would be very curious to hear from you as well, based on this or based on your testing of the two shoes. Obviously, I was always more of a Metaspeed Edge guy, so I would be very happy to also do a comparison with the Metaspeed Edge and maybe against another shoe or again against the PUMA. That is pretty much up to you. Let me know in the comments what you want to see. Thanks a lot to STRYD for sponsoring this video, and yeah, see you guys very soon.